All right, the next form we're going to look at is the cylinder, right? Now, a cylinder is based on a circle also, right? But you only see the circle if you see it from directly above or directly below, right? Anytime you see it at a differing angle, a diagonal angle, you see some sort of ellipse or oval on the top, okay? If you see it directly from the side, it has a lot of rectangular properties. It has a very slight curve on the top and the bottom, but the sides are parallel. Okay. Now, parallel lines, that's important for drawing it accurately. Parallel lines are exactly the same angle, right? Exactly the same distance as they continue on forever, right? So if you draw parallel lines around the entire world, they'll never get further apart, closer apart, they'll never converge, okay? Now, the reason I hold this here, and the reason I'm using my pencil to show you, okay, that's a technique that we'll use to figure out angles, right? But the reason I hold it here is because a center line or a line of symmetry is going to be really important for making sure that these lines are evenly spaced as we plan where our oval is going to go. Okay, so the first step is to draw that line of symmetry. Okay, now we're just going to draw some generic forms for now, and you're going to practice with just lots of different variety. Okay, different thicknesses versus the height, right? All different proportions, all different angles, okay? You can see this one is very flat in terms of the ellipse. This is a little bit rounder, pretty round, okay? Even when we talk about finding the oval in the cone, okay? Or we'll talk about leaving it pointed on top, right? Same process. We want to practice a variety of things, right? That way it not only makes our observation of the four forms that you're going to draw in the next step easier, right? But then you can apply this, as we said before, with the four basic forms, they relate to pretty much every form in the world around us. So as you learn how to assess these objects from observation, it'll make picking apart visually other objects a lot easier, okay? So give yourself the benefit of practicing all kinds of different heights and angles and proportions, okay? So in this case, I'm just gonna draw a line straight up and down for my line of symmetry, right? And then whatever you decide for the width of your cylinder. Okay, so this is our axis of symmetry here. So however far you went on this side, I want to eyeball it and go that far away. Okay, so this is exactly in the middle, right? And again, just practice drawing straight lines by hand. Don't use a ruler for any of this. You won't get better at it unless you practice it, right? And then you want to figure out where your ellipse is going to go on top. Now, this is not going to be, even when I showed you the side of the cylinder like this, it's still not a completely flat line. It's not an exact rectangle, okay? So this is not the top and this is not the bottom of my actual cylinder, right? But if you draw this line that's perpendicular, meaning the complete opposite direction, these make 90-degree angles here, okay? If you draw this line, it's gonna help you get that ellipse to be the right size, okay? To be balanced, and to sit flat as opposed to sitting a little crooked, okay? So a line of symmetry, and then these are gonna help us with our ellipses. So just decide what kind of ellipse you want, okay? This curved line, notice I'm pivoting, in this case, kind of more from my wrist. So this ellipse, half of the ellipse that's up here, right? You're going to create the exact same thing, but reflected on the other side. What I mean by that is you wanna keep those curves similar, okay? So it's a pretty flat oval altogether, all right? And you want this edge here, this distance, to be the same as this distance here. So this is right in the middle, okay? So it's another line of symmetry that helps us plan that ellipse. Okay, so just like that. Make it as balanced as you can, right? And again, this practice, you can keep it sketchy, right? And then in this practice, you'll practice the technique of cleaning up your lines and then making them nice and smooth so that in your next step drawing, you'll have nothing but clean and solid contours, okay? And I'm gonna ask that you keep all your working lines, all your guidelines in this next step as well, okay? But this is the cleaner copy. Right now, we're just kind of roughly practicing things, okay? So here's the trick with the cylinder. Whatever type of ellipse you see here, all right, especially, move it away from that bump. This curve right here, right, from this point down, halfway down, is going to be the exact same curve that's on the bottom, okay? Even when one of these forms, the cone or the cylinder, sits flat on the table, you would never draw it as a flat line on the bottom, okay? So you can kind of think of it like copying and pasting that same curve down below. You can use this as a helpful reference. So however far away from this line, this distance here, okay, you can give yourself a guideline there. These guidelines and these little dots and marks that you make, they're going to be so helpful, not just in this drawing, but we'll talk about drawing other things. At the end of the year, we'll talk about drawing faces, and there's so many guidelines that are going to be helpful for making things symmetric and the right proportion and the right shape. Okay, so get in the habit of using these guidelines that we'll draw lightly so that we can erase them. Okay, it's going to build your accuracy and give you techniques for drawing lots of other things, right? So that same curve from here, I'm going to paste down here. Now, if it's helpful and it's hard to assess that, just that half of the curve right there, right, feel free to draw this whole entire ellipse, okay? Now, our cylinder is solid, so we don't see this back line here, but like I said, if it's helpful, just consider it one of the guidelines that we had. Right? So just like that. So for your next clean contour practice, like I said, leave all your guidelines. Even if you draw these in, I didn't on that one, okay, or that one. But if it's helpful, leave everything. Leave all your guidelines so I can really see your work process. Okay, it's like showing your work in math, right? I can see how you get there. So in reality, don't do this in your practice drawing, but in reality, once we draw from that photograph of the four forms with a strong light source, we're going to come back and we're going to erase our guidelines. So this is really what would be built by using all of those lines. Okay, it's not quite the same proportions. I wasn't necessarily going by this. All right, it's similar. That's more of like a toilet paper roll proportions, right? So same process. I'm just going to go a little bit quicker with this one. So let's say we do more like a hockey puck type of form. All right, so like that, like that. I'm gonna add in, it's gonna be large in terms of the proportion of it. So really wide, so this distance, and again, just eyeball it. If eyeballing isn't accurate for you, that's just a skill that you'll continue to build as well, okay? So that's roughly the same, right? Now, because I did something that was pretty thin in terms of the ellipse there, I'm gonna purposely try something different. So I'm gonna go pretty large, pretty wide from top to bottom with, so that distance is the same as this. So there's my ellipse, okay? So again, practice those same, you're not drawing a perfect circle, but you're drawing curved edges. So practice that whole pivot point idea, okay? And turning things upside down and on their side is a really good way to get a better view of things and to assess things, all right? That's a little curved compared to the rest of my ellipse. Sometimes things don't stand out as being incorrect. You might look at it and say, what's wrong? And the second you rotate it, it stands out like a sore thumb, as they say. So it becomes a lot more obvious. For whatever reason, just our brain tends to pick it up better when you see it from a different angle. Okay. Taking a photograph of something is a good way to better assess it too, because the camera flattens things, and anything that might be inaccurate is a lot of times easier to see when it's flat in a photo. Okay, so just like that, and then I'm gonna copy and paste this distance here, this sort of curve. This is good practice as well, okay? If you want to be able to figure out what exactly this curve is gonna look like here, again, muscle memory. Just kind of motion back and forth to get that curve in place. Okay, I'm just gonna focus on this little curve right here, right, back and forth, and just slide that motion downward like this. So just like that, right? Again, if you wanna draw that whole thing, you can. Okay, so just like that. All right, so make sure you have a line of symmetry, make sure you have parallel edges, all right? And again, it's really helpful if you add in those lines that are perpendicular to these ones. That way you can make sure that your placement and your angle and your sizing of those ellipses is correct.